Hi, this is Roy Worley. Welcome to the interview show that brings on guests from all walks of life. Yeah, it's here that they tell their stories and delve a little deeper into their lives to see what got them where they are. So grab a drink, have a seat, and relax, because this is the Leo Effect.
When was the last time a short movie shook your emotions to the core? When was the last time a short movie caused you to rethink everything you stood for? When was the last time a short movie made you proud to be an American? When was the last time you felt the emotion to stand up and cheer after a short movie? The new short movie, I've Got Your Six, written and directed by Bill Foster, one of the industry's newest and fastest climbing directors, will answer all of those questions. Rarely has there been so much packed into a short movie that when you leave, you'll feel more proud of our American military veterans. A movie that was cast only with American military veterans will have you on the edge of your seat, cheering for our veterans and what makes America great. I've Got Your Six will be hitting the film festival scene soon. Be prepared to drop what you're doing and go see this powerful movie when it comes to your area. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Leo Effect. Today I'm joined by a very special guest from, again, all the way across the Great Pond. And I'm pretty excited to talk to him. He's got some really good stuff to share with you guys, and I really hope you go check it out, as I have. It's definitely some good stuff, and we're going to touch on that. But please allow me to introduce Mr. Chris Tetreault-Blay. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, Ray. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing quite well myself. Much better now that we're finally being able to speak. I think we booked this interview like a couple weeks ago, so it's been a long time coming.
I've been really looking forward to it, actually. Yeah.
Great. Well, without further ado, let's just kind of jump right into it. And, can you tell the listeners what it is that you're doing that has brought you on the show?
So I'm a writer. It's still sort of a bit of a sideline for me, but I've been an author for probably about sort of 5 years now, sort of since I've had my first book published. So so I've started off writing horror fiction, and I've had 5 books published in the past on that line, but I've just moved over into the children's story market as well with the release of my first children's picture book last year. So yeah, I'm sort of cornering both extreme ends of the scale, I think. But yeah, sort of putting my stories out there. Being a writer is definitely something that I'm focusing on a lot more than I used to.
Great, that's amazing. What was it that led you to want to be a writer?
I have no idea. It's not like one day that I'd love to say that I sat down one day and thought, yep, that's exactly what I want to do, or I was going through school and thinking, this is what I want to work towards. But It kind of came out of nowhere. I guess I can trace some of it back to school. There were certain bits. I liked the creative writing projects we got to do sparingly at school. My mum was also very good with writing poems and things like that. She helped me with a lot of little things like that. But I was never a reader. I couldn't focus my brain enough to read, so it didn't even come from that. But back in 2013. My wife found out that she was pregnant, and sort of that it would be the first for us, but then it turned out it was twins. So around that time I was deep in thought, I guess, and I had a lot of things going on, and I mucked around. I taught myself to play the guitar from when I was about 18, 19, and I started off just trying to write song lyrics for a band that I convinced myself that I would have one day.
Oh, okay.
Still hasn't turned out quite like that, but so that was the first point at which I was putting words down on paper and sort of exploring these ideas in my head. These stories or visions I had literally ideas. Actually putting them down and making myself write them down. It felt really weird at first to see myself write down these things that were only thoughts beforehand. I didn't think it was ever going to come to anything. But then I can put it back to one night I was playing. I'm very big into horror, as you'll hear. Okay. I was playing a horror game, Silent Hill, and I had these these ideas of lyrics come down for this really like heavy metal Slayer type song. And as I wrote them down, I thought there's actually like a wider story to this. Maybe if I kind of expanded here and there on some verses and that, I could put a bit more in there. And it ended up, I started writing it into a short story. And from there, I had a couple more ideas, separate ideas that I thought might as well put them down as well. And then just one day, I was just sat writing something, not really trying, I guess. And I found one common thread that all of a sudden tied all these three stories together, and I just went with it from there. Really, that's really the first point. I think that I had something that I looked at and thought, I want to carry on with this, and I want to. There's definitely more to this that I can do and expand on it.
Gotcha. And once you started getting into that and actually writing your stories and things, was there anybody that kind of jumped out as, oh, they're a great inspiration? I kind of want to take some of what they do and incorporate it.
Yeah, James Herbert probably was the first one.
Okay, all right.
My wife was a very she pushed me a couple of times towards reading James Herbert. Again, like I've said, I was never a big reader at all, so I sort of poo-pooed that idea. But then I finally sat down and I read his book, The Others, and it's the first book that I couldn't put down, and I actually read the end of it walking from my car back into work. How the hell I managed that, I don't know, but it was the fact I just could not put it down. I didn't want to wait until like later that day when I finished work to find out what happened. And what I loved about James Herbert was his use of, there was horror obviously in his books, there was gore in his books, but it was always, I would say, justified. It was never gratuitous, and it was very much, it wasn't drawn out, long, unnecessary descriptions. He was very much to the point. And I loved that. And I think, being a Brit as well, we're very direct with some things. I love, I love sort of dry sense of humor and things like that. Being very, very open about really macabre stuff and just talking about it like it's the everyday occurrence. And I really wanted to incorporate some of that style into what I did. So I didn't want to overload it with, horrific stuff. I wanted it to be for all the dark things that happened in my stories. I wanted them to have their own place, their own reason, but also just wanted them to just happen. So the reader was taken by surprise with some of it. That there it was, this horrible act or whatever was going on. It just happened, and then we kind of moved on from it as if it was just a normal. And I think that really sort of gripped me to his books and kept me reading. One of the first writers to really keep me hooked like that.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. And we kind of touched on it a little bit in the very beginning, but like going from horror books to children's books, like that's a pretty big jump. How did that come to be?
Became a dad, really. That's what I put it down to.
Okay.
I never set out and said, even when I started writing, I never thought I would go to children's books at all. Somebody asked me in an interview that I did way back, just after my first book was published, what other genre would I like to do? And I said children's books because I thought it's the most challenging market, because the target audience typically are very, very honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kids will tell you if they love something. They'll also tell you very quickly if they hate it. So if I could write something that was very accepted by them, I felt I would have been a success. It's something I didn't think I could do, going from what I was writing about in the horror genre. But every night I would read to my kids. Started off with obviously typical baby books, and then Thomas the Tank Engine, read through all of those, which was brilliant. I used to read those I used to have those read to me when I was a kid, apparently. Mm-hmm. But then we found the rhyming books, like Julia Donaldson, Room on a Broom, The Gruffalo, things like that. And I loved the way that they had this rhythm to them. It was a joy for me to read them because, again, being a music fan, anything that rhymes, anything that's got a rhythm to it is really appealing.
Right.
So yeah, again, the idea for my children's book, It's a Long Way to the Moon, really came out of nothing one night. Literally, I had I'll just explain the story briefly so that it makes some kind of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a Long Way to the Moon is a story about a little moth who one night decides he sees the moon, and obviously moths being drawn to lights and that kind of thing. He wants to fly to the moon. He thinks it's the most beautiful of lights. He wants to fly to it. So he goes on this little journey to try and reach the moon. And one night I was in my lounge and there was a moth fluttering around the light bulb, which I was trying to get rid of, like right at the end of the night. I just happened to say to my wife when I finally got him out the door, looked up at it was a full moon, I think. And I said to her, do you ever think that a moth has ever confused the moon for a light bulb and tried to bit of an odd thing to think, but it stuck with me. And then over the next few weeks, these little lines came to me, these little rhyming verses. I noted them down on my phone, and yeah, within 3 weeks, I had the story.
That's really cool. That's a great little story.
Yeah.
And that does beg a very interesting question. Have bugs ever done that?
Exactly. I wish I could answer that. My one has tried, so I could. Yeah. It's I love the way that with kids' stories you could take anything, any little thing that's happened, and you can find a story in it. I've been playing with my kids before, and a little phrase would slip out. I'd come up with a silly name or something, and then they seem so taken with it. I on the spot, I would make up just this silly little story for that character, and you get a reaction straight away, which is lovely.
Yeah. And did you test out like rough drafts and things on your kids?
Yeah. Whenever I had sort of a few verses, I would read it to them, just sort of gauge, if they were interested in it, if it sort of resonated with them. Obviously, again at the time, it resembled quite a lot of what I was reading to them, so they had an interest in it. But I also asked for their help along the way. They were old enough at the time that I said to them, if a moth was to fly to the moon, what would he see? Where would he go? And this is where there's a scene in the book where he visits the zoo, and he finds a giraffe. That came from my daughter. Actually, she specifically said he would see a giraffe.
Oh, okay.
So I knew I had to write it in, and yeah, that's how that came to be. So they've been a big help in really sort of shaping what was in it, to be fair.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That would be great to have the help from a child's perspective.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Having them in the ideal is it's aimed for sort of 2 to 6 age group, and they're still within that age group. So it's a perfect demographic really to try that kind of stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you considered possibly like seeing if somebody could turn it into like an animation or something?
Would absolutely love that. Yeah, at the minute I wouldn't know where to start, if I'm honest with you. Haven't got like any contacts.
That's fair. That's
not directly. But my aim for it is to we got a couple of traditions here in the UK with sort of children's stories and that. The BBC has a dedicated sort of toddlers aged TV channel called CBeebies, and at night they finish the just before they kind of close off the air, they have a 5-minute slot where a book is read by a celebrity a lot of the time. So my aim is to either get it on there or have it turned into an animation, which is then on TV on Christmas Day, because that seems to be a bit of a tradition over here as well. So, we'll sort of see.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to see that come to fruition. And, speaking on the children's book part of this, and, we'll move into your other books here shortly, but just speaking on the kids part, moving forward, do you see yourself writing more children's books?
I do, yeah. I've got a follow-up to It's a Long Way to the Moon coming later this year, actually, where the same little moth character has I feel it's an even better story. I'm really proud of this one, where he actually one night he meets Santa.
Oh, cool.
Oh, I'm a massive Christmas fan. My kids absolutely love Christmas. I wrote it way before Christmas. I think I wrote it in like September last year. Um, but yeah, the idea that I kind of took the idea of uh, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer leading the sleigh in a foggy night. It starts off in the moth gets lost in the fog one night on Christmas Eve, and then he sees the glowing red. So like he was drawn to the moon in the first one, he's drawn to this red glow, which ends up obviously being Rudolph's nose. Um, and he kind of he tries to follow them, and then he eventually he meets he goes down to the rooftop where Santa and his reindeer and the sleigh and that is stopped, and he has a little adventure along with Santa. So
That's a great idea.
I'm really looking forward to sort of promoting that one when it's out, because they're looking at trying to get it published for about sort of October time, so it'll be well positioned and it'll be perfect time.
Okay. That sounds good. I'm gonna keep an eye out for that one. I think my kids would enjoy that.
Cool. Yeah.
And transitioning a little bit to your other works, more to the adult-oriented, I would guess. Can you tell me more about your horror books?
Yeah, sure. So I started off writing a trilogy, which collectively was called the Wildemore Apocalypse, which you can still. They're in the process of being republished by a new publisher I went with about 18 months ago.
Oh, okay.
The first two parts are currently still available. So you've got the first part, which is called Acolyte, and the second part is the Sowing Season. The idea behind it is it's a series set on quite a remote, like moorland sort of town. Where I live in Devon in southwest England, we're positioned just at the base of like the main moorland down here. So I'm very inspired by a place that's quite not barren, but far enough away from general civilization that it's peaceful, but you could be quite far removed from the normal hustle and bustle of town life.
I see. Okay.
So it all came from, I was fascinated years ago with the idea that the world was going to end in 2012. Specifically December the 21st, the whole Mayan prophecy.
Yeah.
And I remember just wondering, firstly, what was going to happen? Just waiting for this change, whether it's going to be something catastrophic, something really small. I remember being in work on the 22nd of December 2012 and being quite disappointed, really, that nothing seemed to have happened. So I actually, from that minute on, I started thinking, well, nobody really knew what form the apocalypse, if it was going to happen, was going to take. So what if something had happened that was going to trigger an apocalypse, or something catastrophic had happened, but far enough away from, again, main civilization that we really didn't even know, which is where the community of Wildemore came. It's a small town, really sort of the main town part, situated in the middle of this vast sort of moorland stretch, and it's told over two time periods. So the part of it goes back to like the 1600s, telling of how a band of priests who had been shunned by the new parliament at the time, who decided that their version of Christianity, their version of religion, was wrong. They then sort of came together and they went a bit renegade, I suppose, and they turned to the dark side in a way. They summoned something that they thought was going to wreak revenge on those that had wronged them. It all goes a little bit wrong. Basically, what happens is they start from that point. They start the workings of what will eventually be the apocalypse. They raise some sort of evil that will hang over Wildemore for the next sort of 400 years or so. And then it kind of the other side is told from the more present day, sort of early 2000s through to 2012, and I jump in and out of the time periods to kind of tell the backstory alongside the sort of more recent story that's going on. So I've got a couple of different sort of antagonists, one in each time frame. I've got different protagonists. I've got a lot of characters that are at the forefront of all three books, and they each play their part, sort of working towards the finale in the third book. So,
Right on. That sounds like a good series.
I didn't. Again, I'm not as typically as a writer. You either get two types of writer. You get one that plans, or you get one that just sort of writes without any kind of planning, sort of pantsers as they call them. And I'm one of those. I don't really have the attention span to plan my work.
Gotcha. So no storyboards or anything like that.
I think looking back on it, doing a trilogy, especially one that spanned like 400 years, I probably could have done with a timeline at least to kind of keep up with it, because I did sort of sometimes I had to go back like 2 books to find out, Christ, what year was that, just so I can keep it along the same line. But no, I find it a lot more organic just to sit there and write what comes to me and let the stories really form themselves, sort of thing. But that's sort of where I started. The most recent horror that I've released was a book called A Necessary End, and I released that under my own publishing company last year.
Oh, cool!
So it's mostly sort of self-published, but I'm trying to put myself under an umbrella that I can actually do more work under and potentially help other authors, down the line. It's a dream of mine to help others release their books under it as well, maybe, So.
Yeah, that'd be really fantastic. And so kind of speaking along those lines, like what advice would you have for somebody that's just getting into it?
I mean, really, as cheesy as it sounds, firstly, just do it. You've got any ideas rattling around your brain, don't think that there's a kind of formula to writing a book. Really, the first step is just to sit there and just write it. Anything that comes to your mind, even if you're not writing a story that is fully formed in your head, or even if you don't think you're starting writing at the beginning, the best thing is just see where it takes you. I wrote my book in the middle, and I ended up writing a beginning and writing an end, after I wrote the middle part. But never think you can't do it, I think, because I still have a full-time job. I've got a young family. My writing is done around all of that. Gotcha. So there's no, you don't have to have a structure to it. Don't feel put off if you can't dedicate every single day to it. Really, as long as you're putting something down on paper, no matter how sporadic it is, at some point you'll have something that then will just take you. And never think there's just one avenue to get published either. You don't have to go this day and age. You don't have to have an agent and go through like one of the big 5 publishing houses. That self-publishing is I think so valuable, but so accessible to all authors now.
Gotcha.
So you can really you can do it for yourself. Mm-hmm. There's every way possible. So yeah, just do it. Don't give up.
So speaking from a publisher standpoint, what kind of authors and book genres are you looking for? Any and all, or do you want to keep with a horror theme or a kids theme?
I think under the publishing company as I've set it up, as I've named it, it's called Dead Men's Tales Publishing. It kind of lends itself, I think, more to the horror side.
Yeah. Just a little.
Just a little. That's where I'd like to start. I mean, I've had a great along the years that I've been doing this so far. The author community is one of the best communities to belong to. You really meet some great people, some really talented people who sometimes just need some avenue to get their work out there for people to realize how good they are. So I know quite a few that write in the horror genre who I would like to work with down the line. But then again, I've got another kids book which is aimed at a slightly older reading group that I've got in the works at the minute. I've not yet finished it, but I toyed with the idea of maybe releasing that under it, maybe having that sort of mid sort of teenage age group up to adults possibly could find a home under there. But yeah, I sort of keep the kids' books and my horror stuff separate, which is one of the reasons why I created Dead Man's Tales, really just to give my horror stuff a home that didn't interfere with the other market, really.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And between a full-time job, a family, trying to write in between all of that, what do you do to unwind? What do you do for fun?
God, yeah. I mean, writing really was my way to unwind. It started off. I had I wouldn't say like dark times or anything. I struggled with anxiety and that before I started writing. It was really my avenue to. It was my therapy in a way to get myself out of that. So I do go back to whenever I can write. It's usually because I need that time to really quieten down, shut my mind off. But no, apart from that, I spend as much time as I can with my wife, really. So, we don't get as much time as we used to. So every evening, really, for a couple of hours, it's just sort of sit down, talk with her, watch TV, have a drink, anything like that. It's just valuing that time that I've not got anything going on, really.
Yeah, well, that makes total sense.
Yes.
That's great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been a pleasure to talk to, and you're just full of good stuff. And I really hope people go and check out your book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to say as well, I've become a big fan of your podcast. So I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
It was through a fellow author of mine who was a guest on your show a little while ago that I discovered you, and I've gone back and I've listened to a number of shows, and you've had some great guests on. And people that I remember almost their characters on TV and in movies in particular that I remember but didn't know that I knew them. And it's discovering, hearing people's stories like that you don't see in the mainstream necessarily. I think it's an absolutely brilliant podcast to listen to for that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well,
and, I wouldn't do any of this if it wasn't for the fans that tune in and listen and check things out. And I hope they reciprocate by going and checking out your books and, getting some reading done. And so thank you all very much. And thank you again, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the listeners that tuned in, make sure to go and check out Chris's stuff. And, before we close things up, I think that would be a nice little way to wrap things up nice and neat is, Chris, if you have like some social medias or websites that you want to direct people to, that would be a fantastic time to tell them about it.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to find me on social media is on Facebook. I've got a book page set up for my children's book, It's a Long Way to the Moon. So you can either find it just by searching It's a Long Way to the Moon, or going using @LittleBrownMoth as the tag. You can find me on Twitter. It's @Tetreault-Blay. And I'm also on Instagram at author.Tetreault-Blay, but it's mainly Facebook that I use, and I put up the links on there. You can find my books on Amazon in the UK as well. They're listed on Waterstones. I think in the US, a couple of my books are on Barnes and Noble as well. So yeah, check it out. You always go to my Facebook page and you can see everything from there if you need somewhere to start.
Right. That's fantastic. And, to my listeners, if you get the Anchor app rather than checking it out online, if you get the app, you can actually read the descriptions that I type in for every podcast. And that's where I'm going to have all Chris's information listed, all nice and neat packaging. So you just click and off you go. So make sure to check that out. And once again, thank you all to the listeners who tuned in to check this out. We hope you stick around for the next one, and we will see you next time. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, creatures of all ages, what an amazing show. Thank you for lending an ear and joining us. I'm the host, Ray Rumsey, and if you want to hear more interviews, simply head to anywhere podcasts are heard, Facebook or Twitter, and search The Leo Effects, with an A, not an E. If you'd like to hear me doing silly voices and making a general fool of myself, head over to Shattered Dungeons on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We live stream every Tuesday night. More projects are in the works. For now, stay tuned for more interviews. To book yourself as a guest, you can head to theleoeffects.wixsite.com/podcast or send me an email at theleoeffects@gmail.com. Remember, this has been The Leo Effects, and great shows require great listeners, just like you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.